Hello, YouTubers, and welcome back to another episode of The Grandstand here on the Ohio Patriot Education Network YouTube channel. I'm, as always, your host here, the Ohio Patriot, and for today's episode, we're going to talk about the Kyle Rittenhouse self-defense, being that it is now the 50th anniversary of that event happening. So, that's an interesting one, obviously, that it's now been 5 years to the day of Kyle's self-defense encounter there in Kenosha, Wisconsin. So I'm going to go over a few things with that one. What led to it, obviously, how things have changed since then in America when it comes to pro-2A rights and stuff like that. And then we're going to continue on and talk about a few other things as well. So, obviously, for those that don't know, the stupid people in America, the leftist idiots and stuff, still believe that Kyle Rittenhouse shot and killed at least two black people, which is a complete lie. He shot and killed two white people in self-defense. He fired at a black dude who was jump kicking him in the face, and then he blew a guy named Gage Grosskreuz's arm off, is what it was. His bicep specifically is what it was there, after Gage pulled a gun on him. So, yeah, everybody involved in this is a shitbag, and I'm honestly, going back over the whole thing, I'm actually really surprised that Kyle even survived that. I really am. But basically, going to where this all started, obviously. So there was a guy named Jacob Blake in Kenosha, Wisconsin, who was a black criminal who specifically was at the house of a woman who I believed he had raped previously to that and was trying to either sexually assault her again that day or something similar to that. And so basically the cops were called out there. And mind you, at the time, Jacob had basically a little, I think it was something similar to this kind of knife, actually, where it was a little, karambit style, blade in his hands. So it would be, kind of like that or whatever, or it would be, that kind of thing or whatever there. And he was going back to the van that I believe he had stolen from this woman, is what it was, and was trying to get something else out of the van, which I believe was another weapon, if I'm not mistaken. And that's when a cop basically, popped him in the back a few times with the gun, is what it was then. And that's basically what started the whole Kenosha civil unrest, is what it was there. / riots is what it was. And so I believe it was on the third night of the rioting is when the Rittenhouse self-defense shooting happened, is what it was there, which up to that point, from my understanding, Kyle actually supported BLM, is what it was, which is, beyond me why you would do that. But again, the kid was 17 years old at the time. Obviously, backstory as well for that whole thing that people want to always bitch and moan about. So, first and foremost, there was a rifle that was purchased in the state of Wisconsin by a different person named Dominic Black, who was a friend of Kyle Rittenhouse's. This is the rifle that Kyle had that night. The only thing that Kyle technically did wrong legally was that he was not 18 years old. He could not legally buy the rifle himself. So he kind of, sort of, in a backwards way, used Dominic Black to sort of make a straw purchase, what it was there. That being said, Kyle was never brought up on those charges, neither was Dominic Black. And obviously, since then, you had Kyle, have to go through the whole court case of defending himself and being acquitted back in 2023 is what it was there. So the whole point of it is, though, it's kind of a moot point, honestly, at this point. I don't think anybody would ever bring charges against him or the other guy for that matter, just because of that reason, because it's honestly, I think, kind of hard to prove it being an actual legit straw purchase what it is there. Not to mention the fact that Kyle is such a known name at this point, now 5 years later, because of this, that it would basically be malicious persecution, I believe is what it is now. And I believe that there's also a statute of limitations on stuff like that. So I want to say that the potential prosecutors in this situation, whether it be state or federal for that matter, have basically lost their window of, statute limitations, what it is there. So the entire point, though, is going back to where we're at right now is obviously, this all happened in 2020. The whole rioting started over some dumbass criminal, just like every fucking riot in entirety of 2020 there is what it was. All started over dumbass fucking criminals, what it was there. And that's why you had BLM out in one of the cities chanting who would protect black criminals. That's what they were chanting. So I also want to point something out too. I took out, before we get more into the Rittenhouse thing here, this is kind of off topic a little bit, but I want to point out how much here in 2025 now, the weather has kind of changed in the past like several days now. So I took this cup out of my fridge, which had a little bit of ice in it. Because my fridge is so cold is what it is there. Like there's a cold spot in it where it just kind of, this particular kind of plastic cup freezes what it is there. And I noticed that there was like a little ice thing, and that's what it is right now. This is still cold to the touch, like over an hour later is what it is right now, which is kind of crazy to think about because there is, it really shows like just how much the temperature has dropped today is what it is there. I don't have my family anymore right now, so. But yeah, usually that would be melted like, if it was like 70, 80, it would be melted like an hour or two ago. Like within 5 minutes of taking it out, but it still hasn't melted completely right now. Over an hour later is what it is now, which is pretty wild. So, but anyway, yeah, it just shows like how much difference there is there. But going back to what I was saying though about Rittenhouse. So, yeah, you basically had Kyle support BLM at the time. Obviously, the previous 2 nights, you had the Kenosha, Wisconsin mayor, as well as the Wisconsin governor, Tony Evers, who basically let this rioting happen, and even to the point where Trump at the time, obviously being president then, he was telling Tony Evers, he's like, dude, like I can send you like 500 to 1,000 National Guardsmen right now is what it is if you want them. And Tony Evers was like, no, we don't need them. And it's like, the hell you didn't, dude. Yeah, ironically, if it wasn't for Rittenhouse's self-defense shooting, the rioting would have continued on for many, many more nights. There's what it was. But because of the self-defense shooting by Kyle Rittenhouse, it basically ended the stuff that night is what it was. Like the next day is when the cops actually started doing their job and doing stuff correctly is what it was there. So I do want to point all that out, obviously, because it does matter in this context. That being said, going to the other players in the situation, for the whole Kenosha unrest shooting is what they call it there. So you basically had multiple people out there that were all convicted felons, by the way. You had Anthony Hooper, who was the Antifa skateboard motherfucker, who, by the way, I will maintain to this day, actually pulled the rifle towards himself and actually killed himself with Kyle Rittenhouse's gun. Because I believe the way, if you go, I want to say if you like super slow-mo the actual video in question, I'm not going to show it, obviously. But if you like super slow-mo it when he's like trying to grab the AR from Kyle's hands is what it is, he like jerks it towards himself, like right at his chest is what it is there, which obviously that kid got shot in the heart is what it was. And I believe what happened was you had Kyle's hand, it was either in the trigger guard at the time, or it was like off to the side or whatever, but it like did like such force that it basically forced his finger to be able to pull the triggers what it was then. So like it was all momentum basically on that one is what I believe happened in that situation. But anyway, the entire point of the matter is you had Anthony Hoover, who was a convicted, I believe it was domestic abuser because he was beating his grandmother and a few other people, so it was there. You had Joseph Rosenbaum, who was a convicted pedophile, who for some reason was out of prison ever, even though he was a violent nutcase. He was also, I believe, a lunatic. Like literally, he was a fucking mental patient, basically. But yeah, this dude was in prison, I believe it was Arizona, for raping 5 boys between the ages of 9 and 11 years old. And then apparently was let out of prison after he was like in violent fights in prison and had more time added to his sentence because of that is what it was, original sentence. And then you had the third guy, Gage Grosskreutz, who was convicted of robbery and was illegally in possession of a firearm at that time because he had previously had a valid, I believe CCW is what it was, but that of itself was then taken away because of his conviction. So he was basically legally carrying that night is what it was in Kenosha, Wisconsin, which is obviously a leftist, city and a leftist state that gun rights don't exist in for constitutional carry is what it is there. But it wouldn't matter if he had constitutional carry on his side or not because he was still a felon. And for those who don't know about constitutional carry laws, they only apply to people who do not have criminal records, and specifically are non-felons is what it is there. So it wouldn't have mattered anyway because he still would have been legally carrying is what it is. And of course, he was faking to be a medic that night, but in reality, he was one of these Antifa medics is what it was, which is basically, just a fake medic is what it is. Ironically enough, it was Kyle Rittenhouse that night who was doing actual medic stuff for people and helping people, do stuff with what it is there. And so basically, from my understanding, going to the timeline of events from where I'm at right now, I'm going to kind of condense it down to what it is here. Because I'm not going to go over the whole timeline because that would take an hour or two probably. But what was very interesting after the fact that we found out was that the feds, specifically the FBI, had drones flying that night at the place, which I thought was very interesting. That they wouldn't have stepped in and stopped this whole thing is what it is, which kind of makes me wonder, given that time and given how corrupt the FBI is and, my previous encounter with them about a year earlier than that, it does make me wonder if, in fact, they were not complacent in this whole thing is what it is, because that would make total sense to me, honestly. But the entire point of the matter is obviously they had drones flying over the city of Kenosha that night. They were, videoing everything. They had, infrared stuff is what it is there. This is all stuff we learned from Kyle Rittenhouse's trial in 2023 is what it was, et cetera, et cetera. So basically, from my understanding, timeline of events-wise, you had the previous 2 nights where these people were rioting and stuff like that. And then the third night, you had a guy named Joshua Zeminski who was using the alias of Alexander Blaine is what it was. This guy was also a convicted felon. I want to point something out too by the way, in this whole thing, is that when it came to the prosecution of Kyle Rittenhouse there in 2020, I believe it was 2021, that eventually led to trial in 2023 is what was there. It was by this piece of shit leftist DA named Thomas Binger, and I believe the assistant DA or something on the case there was some dude named Kraus or Cross or something like that what it was. I want to say it was more like Kraus because it was German or whatever. He was basically German descent is what it is there. But the entire point is that this piece of shit Binger cut plea deals with not only Joshua Zeminski, who was responsible for firing the first shot that night that led to the whole self-defense shooting by Rittenhouse of Rosenbaum and Hoover and everybody else like that what it was. He also gave plea deals to everybody else involved, including Gage Grosskreutz, who admitted after the fact that he was trying to kill Kyle. And it wasn't until, and what was even crazier was at the trial was Grosskreutz had his whole bicep blown off with Kyle's shot to his arm is what it was there. This fucking idiot admitted on the stand that Kyle did not fire a shot or even point his gun at him until Gage literally tried to level a Glock at Kyle's head is what it was. And my thing is how is that alone not an arrestable offense after the fact is what it is, because you're admitting on the fucking stand under oath that you were the criminal that night and that you were doing criminal stuff that was equivalent to attempted murder is what it is there. So, and even the fact that Grosskreutz' buddy when he was in the hospital basically posted the same thing about talking to Gage about oh yeah, Gage wanted to kill the kid or whatever that night, and it's yeah, how is this motherfucker not under arrest for a bunch of stuff is what it is then? How is he basically your star witness is what it is there? It's just insane to me. And it really just shows the fuckery of our society is what it is there. And why these DAs and just leftist pieces of shit in general need to be out of position of power is what it is in this country, because they have no business being in this position of power in the first place is what it is there. So but anyway, I end up getting to kind of a lot topic here for a second though. I end up getting a new knife. This is a quick preview of today's Tactically Cool Tuesday. Got this at Walmart last night. I was gonna pick up the those 2 crossbars, but they didn't have them in stock. I believe what it was. I was trying to look in the cases. I didn't see any of them there. I thought this was gonna come up at $8, but apparently it was on sale because they're reducing them to cycle them out. This was $3 last night, so the problem is it doesn't really want to flick open the way it needs to. And I think it's because of I think the reason obviously is because of the metal on there, and it's not like G10 scales or something like that, because it is like extremely hard to pop open. There you go. But yeah, it's a nice little sheep's head. So the one thing I do like about this though is, with the exception of that, because it should be a little different, obviously how it like flicks. There it is. It's easier. Yeah, it's a nice little bar lock in the back. There's what it is. So I would say if you're gonna give a knife to a kid to where it can like lock, like that would be the best way to do it right there, obviously. So that being said, I know there's also a failure point in these kind of Chinese-made knives too, for that matter, because I've seen it happen myself a few times. But anyway, so going back to the Rittenhouse self-defense situation there, in case. So you had Rittenhouse, who, after the second night of rioting, that third day is what it was, he was out cleaning up the city of Kenosha and like cleaning up all the graffiti that Antifa, BLM, etc. had done the previous night that it was there. At some point during that day, I think it was after they had cleaned the stuff up, so it was, Kyle had gone back to the house of his buddy Dominic Black, who I believe Dominic was friends with Kyle because he was banging one of Kyle's sisters at the time, is what it was. Because it's another thing too, by the way, and that's stuff that came out during the trials. What it was, how Dominic was basically trying to save his own ass from getting hit with charges and stuff like that, and went to Kyle's sister, who he had previously been fucking, I believe is what it was, and was like, hey, like, just to let you know, like, you know, I'm basically gonna, you know, cut a deal or whatever here. And she's like, what do you mean you're gonna cut a deal against my brother? Like, what the fuck, bro? So yeah, like, it's just a mess up situation all the way around, and it's really sad how everybody was trying to throw this 17-year-old under the bus at the time or whatever, which obviously in 2023 then Kyle would have been like 20 years old, I believe is what it was. But yeah, it's still fucked up either way. And I believe it's because of the fact that Dominic Black knew he had done something wrong that night, is what it was. So anyway, and obviously some of the stuff I'm going to talk about came out in trial. That's what it was there. Like Kyle getting the gun, etc. there. So from my understanding, going back to what I was saying earlier about the whole straw purchase thing, so basically Kyle had given Dominic money to buy this AR like a year or so before that's what it was. And he ended up doing so, and then him and Kyle went out to a range, like in some like quarry place or whatever, for like a couple hours one day, and we're like firing off some rounds, and that's basically the extent of what Kyle's whole experience was in handling of AR-15s. Was, if I'm not mistaken, at least according to what Kyle said that night on the trial, what it was there. So he did not have a whole lot of experience. That being said, it doesn't take a whole lot of experience to shoot a gun like that, dude. Like, it's actually one of the most easy battery of arms to get a hold of and stuff like that and do stuff with what it is. So anyway, so basically going back to what I was saying though, you had Kyle cleaning graffiti that morning / afternoon is what it was. Then I believe what it was is he and Dominic had gone to Dom's house, there's what it was, and we're hanging out with his dad and a few other people, is what it was there, or whatever, and getting something to eat, whatever it was there. And at some point, you had a guy who was the, I believe, owner of multiple car dealerships there in Kenosha, who had obviously had one of his dealerships, I believe, already burned to the ground that week, is what it was, from the rioting, is what it was there. And he had contacted, I believe it was somebody else who was like the lead guy in the, I'm going to say that guy's name was Ryan, but I could be wrong about that one, because I believe that dude was on the stand at one point during Kyle's self-defense case, is what it was there, where he's being prosecuted by the piece of shit banger. And so what ended up happening was you had, I believe, this car dealership owner guy contact this Ryan dude, is what it was. I think the guy's name was Ryan. And he knew that this dude had basically had, I believe it was a little bit of previous military experience, but also he had had like a group of people that were willing to step up and basically be volunteers to like protect businesses, what it was there. And then it was that dude who I believe contacted Dominic Black and was like, hey, dude, like, I know we're buddies. Like, you want to come help me out with this business tonight or whatever the case be, and like protect this guy's stuff, whatever, from getting burned to the ground, basically. And the guy, and then Dominic was like, yeah, sure, you mind if I bring somebody along or whatever? And the guy's like, no, more mayor kind of thing, whatever. And that's basically why Rittenhouse was there, is what it was, because Kyle had, you know, the ability to go there and do that stuff, is what it was. And I believe the reason he was also bringing Kyle along was in case of them needing like medical treatment and stuff like that, because obviously Kyle was a certified I believe he was a certified EMT at that time, from being like a lifeguard and stuff like that, is what it was. So, or at least had like certified CPR training and like basic, you know, medical skills, is what it was there, essentially. And again, like you can find videos of Kenosha from 5 years ago there, where Rittenhouse is literally walking around with a little, I think it's like an Ozark Trail bag or something that was like full of like various medical supplies and stuff like that. Like mostly it was, I believe, just like gauze and like other like small stuff, like some tape and whatnot, like different, like, you know, like the basics of a first aid kit, essentially, what was there. That the people had like minor scrapes or cuts, or whatever the case be, you could like take care of them for them and stuff like that. And they wouldn't have to go to like a hospital and deal with the, you know, overwhelmed hospital, basically is what it is there. So anyway, at some point that night though is where everything kind of came to fruition, is what it was, because you had multiple encounters, where one of the encounters was at a place called the Ultimo, I think it was Ultimate gas station or Ultimo gas station, something like that. And it was at this point is where we got the first encounter of the nutcase pedophile known as Joseph Rosenbaum, where he was basically like talking about, because there's another group of people there called the Kenosha Guard, was what it was, which was like basically another, it was basically this little set of people who were essentially like some kind of weird militia thing, is what it was there. And he was basically telling them to blast them and stuff like that, which from my understanding too on that one, that particular gas station in question, because they were trying to burn that gas station down as well, you had had the cops go around that day and basically shut off the pumps at that gas station permanently, so they couldn't be used to fuel the rioting, is what it was there. So, and that's another thing too, by the way, that pisses me off about the whole situation is you had all these police in this police department there in Kenosha, Wisconsin, who are willing to go out there and do preventative measures like that. But then you have the piece of shit mayor and the piece of shit governor of Wisconsin who refuse to do their job and actually just shut this shit down and be like, no, this is an unlaw. Like, it would have been so fucking easy for them to do stuff there, dude. They could have, they wouldn't have, honestly, wouldn't have to bring a National Guard. They could have just brought in like a bunch of cops that was there and been like, this entire demonstration has been declared an unlawful riot. Disperse now or be arrested. Like, that's all they would have had to do, honestly. And then just start arresting people. And it would have never even had, this whole self-defense encounter of Kyle Rittenhouse would never even had to happen to begin with what was there. But this is the problem when you have leftist DAs and politicians in power who just want to basically let everything burn. And this is what bothers me now, 5 years later, of why Tony Evers is still a sitting governor currently, because he should have been charged with every single fucking crime that happened in Kenosha, Wisconsin in 2020. And so should the mayor of that city, so should the vice mayor of that city, so should the entire city council, etc., because they were all complacent with it. Every single one of these people was complacent in what happened that night, and what happened the previous nights, and what happened the day after, etc. And we as a society are still letting these people get off over 5 years later now, is what it is, even though they were the ones 100% responsible for all this shit, is what it is. So anyway, going back to the actual self-defense shooting itself, there is what it was. So basically, going back to the gas station there, you had all three people who were like the main players. Well, I guess technically, well, yeah, because there was actually four guys that were the main players. There's what it was. You had Joshua Zeminski, aka Alexander Blaine. You had Rosenbaum. You had Huber, and then you had Grosskreutz. I think I want to say Grosskreutz was maybe off to the side at that gas station doing something, is what it was. But then you had when Rosenbaum was doing all the crazy shit and like telling this Kenosha Guard guys like blasting him and stuff like that. You had Zeminski, who was like right behind him and was like at least a foot taller than his ass. And then you had, I believe it was Huber within like 5 feet of them or something. That's what was in that shot of a lot of the videos what was there. And so you basically had all them basically trying to go nuts and stuff like that and trying to start shit with these random individuals that were armed that night as it was. And so from my understanding from there, going back to that dude who Kyle was with that night, who I think his name was Ryan, but I could be wrong about that. And that was the dude who had like previous, I believe he had a previous tour of duty in like Afghanistan or Iraq, one of these other countries. There's what it was during military service. And it was supposedly him and Rittenhouse, at least according to them, that said that they were basically just chilling out there. And like, I think this dude was having a smoke with Kyle or something like that's what it was. And you had a Rosenbaum come up to them and was like, oh, if I see you guys out here, like, you're fucking dunzo, basically. And like, essentially, like, tell him he's going to murder him that night is what it was there. And so from there, you end up having that Richie guy from, I believe it was Daily Caller, who had come into the mix at that point and was talking about how he had an experience with Zeminski, who was going under the alias Alexander Blaine that night, and was discussing about how he basically had pulled out like a White Claw to give this dude so he wouldn't get clapped that night, basically, from his assholes. What it was, because in that case, Zeminski, being a convicted felon and being, I believe he had ties to biker gangs in Las Vegas, is what it was. But he also had like a rap sheet, like longer than your arm, basically, is what it was at that point, of like felony records. He was also illegally carrying that night. I believe he had a small 380, like an LCP or something like that, was what it was there. And it was that gun that was used to fire the first shot. Then is what it was. And then it was at that point is when you had Rosenbaum basically chasing right behind Kyle. And then Kyle hearing the shot being fired over his head there, turning around, seeing Joseph Rosenbaum like grab for his gun and was like pop, pop, pop. And then it was right after that, you had another guy who I don't know what that dude's name was. I believe that dude had some kind of an AK is what it was. And he thought people were shooting at him. So he ended up firing off like a 3-round burst is what it was there. And that's when you hear, like, basically that's why you hear, or wait, I'm trying to remember now. I think Kyle fired 4 shots. That's what it was. Because you had, it was like an 8-shot combo is what it was there, because it was, you had Zeminski shoot off the first round that like whizzed over Kyle's head is what it was there. You had Kyle pop, 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 pop into Rosenbaum's like pelvic girdle, essentially, is what it was there. And that's basically what killed him, is what it was. And then you had this other random guy being like, dern, 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 like 3 times with like an AK or something like that's what it was there. And that guy ended up getting charged after the fact with, I believe it was discharging a firearm within like city limits or within like residential area, something like that's what it was. It was some stupid charge like that's what it was there. So anyway, then of course you have the whole thing that happened after that, where you had Kyle, you know, shooting Rosenbaum, end up making the call to what we now know Dominic Black at that point, being like, hey, I just shot somebody, and then kind of zipping out of there. He tried to go, I believe it was this way originally, and that's when Zeminski and his wife were there, and were telling all this other group of Antifa/BLM type of terrorists that was there, of, oh, this dude just killed somebody, kill his ass, basically. And that's when they were, and then you could hear like the background noise or somebody's like cranium that boy and stuff like that. That's what it was during Kyle's like, you know, Kenosha run is what it was there. Like, what do they call it now? It's like the Kenosha Mile or something, I think is what they called it. And then, of course, you see like everything else happen. You see the guy that was jump kick man, which I forget they said that guy's name was in the trial as well, because they, and that's what's even more fucked up too, by the way, is that it was like the day after that happened, the cops, the politicians, etc., there in Kenosha knew exactly who that guy was, because that particular black dude was, again, another convicted felon with a long ass fucking rap sheet. Like, we're seeing a pattern here, right? Like, literally the only person that was not a convicted criminal at that point was Kyle Rittenhouse. Like, everybody else that he shot at or killed that night had felony records and had no business even walking on our streets at that point, dude. So it's just insane to me how, like, we're putting up with this shit years later now is what it is. So anyway, so that dude tried to kick Kyle. Obviously, you had Rittenhouse miss a couple times because he like fired off a couple rounds at that point. And then that's when Hoover tried to smack him with the skateboard in the head and then pulled that rifle towards him and getting shot there is what it was. And then you had Gage try to advance with his own handgun and stuff like that. Like stop and be like, oh no, I'm not doing anything. And then try to like what you call it. And that's when Kyle like and popped him in the arm as what it was there. Then you heard Gage run off like little bitches with this then, which is pretty hilarious. Yelling for a medic. Because obviously it was a fake medic and went to real medic is what was there. And then, of course, basically you had everything else happen. There was other video of like various angles and stuff like that. At that point, there was also somebody who was, if you look at how Kyle was running this way, there was like like street off to the side there, and there was somebody in that street who was either filming and shooting a gun at the same time, or there was somebody filming and there was somebody right next to him firing off a gun in Kyle's general direction and stuff like that and missing horribly is what it was. So I would not be surprised if you actually look into like court records and stuff like that, or even just like records of like various things from that night is what it was. And there was like some random person that got killed that night by these idiots is what it was then. Because the way that person was firing off, I would not be surprised in the least if there was like a couple bullets that went through somebody's house that was there and killed somebody there, or at least like maybe nearly missed somebody and then like, you know, caused a bunch of damage inside the house or stuff like that or whatever it was. So either way, doesn't really matter, but it's interesting context to bring into that whole situation. That's what it was. And then of course Kyle's, you know, still trying to run towards the cops. At that point, you had him obviously go towards a cop car is what it was there. And like knocking on the window of like kind of trying to surrender himself at that point. This fucking piece of shit cop, by the way, in that situation, I forget what his name was offhand, but he was one of the witnesses during the trials when it was there. This motherfucker admits on the stand that he purposefully sprayed Kyle in the face with a can of OC spray is what it was, and was like smirking and like kind of laughing about it on the stand. Like, dude, you're a fucking piece of shit. Like for real. Like this is why people hate cops so much in this country, by the way, is because of fucking douchebags like that. And that's another problem with society entirely, is we let douchebags like that continue to be on the force after the fact when they do crap like that's what it is, dude, instead of being fired immediately and being, you know, banned for life from ever being in law enforcement ever again is what it is there. So, anyways, yeah, that's basically the gist of how, you know, the whole thing went down. That's what it was. And of course, like we found out after the fact, all the other stuff happened there. That's what it was. Obviously, you had Kyle get acquitted in 2023. There's what it is. You know, other things happened obviously since then. You had, obviously, Texas in 2021 became a constitutional carry state. Ohio and other states became constitutional carry states in 2022. You had a couple more become constitutional carry states in 2023. And you basically have had gun rights expand pretty quickly in this country in the last 5 years or so. And you've also had knife rights expand, too, in that 5-year time span as well, too, for that matter. So, yeah, there's a lot of good stuff that's happened, obviously, there. There's obviously a lot of bad stuff's happened, too. Obviously, me personally, my mother has passed since then. I'm now living in an apartment, still living at the house that she owned at that time because it had to be sold out, obviously, from under me. And fuck my generational wealth, it kind of still pisses me off today, honestly, because fuck Chase Bank in general. Those people are just complete scumbags. And yeah, we're just figuring out like a lot of stuff nowadays of just how corporate scummery is going on right now is what it is. So, and then of course, in that time, you've now had Democrats cheat their way into office for 4 years, fuck up our country, inflate our shit constantly, daily is what it is there. And now you have Trump back in place for the last 7 months or so now is what it is. So, yeah, things are, it's an interesting time period basically to live in right now. So, I will say this, going back to the Ozark Trail knife there. Yeah, that flipper is not great on this because this is like, I think honestly it might just be that it's so metal is what it is there that it's like hard to get like the liner lock clip there to like pull apart enough to like slide this thing out. I might just need oil or something like that. I'm not sure, but yeah, it's like super stiff to pull out. That's what it is. Like you basically have to do a two-handed like flip on this thing. It's not wanting to flip for me as it is right now. So yeah, I think it just maybe needs some oil is what it is there because it's just super. It's like really, really hard to pop. So I might just need to oil it up is what it is there. Also, that metal liner lock is like very hard to like pop apart again. This is exactly why I prefer G10 handled knives, not stuff like this. What it is there. I don't know. I don't know if I have any WD-40 on here right now. Like I know I have my little 3-in-1 oil can right here is what it is though. So, by the way, for those interested, this is what I use on my guns to clean my guns and stuff like that. This is also what I obviously have used to oil these knives and stuff like that in the last few days now. So, like, I'll take a little bit of, like, do a little squirt on some Q-tip is what it is there, and then just rub it into the pivot points and stuff on these knives, what it is there. So, that usually tends to work. That takes a while to get it done there, is what it is there. So, anyway, but yeah, so going back to the whole Rittenhouse self-defense there is what it is. Obviously, you had Kyle acquitted there a couple years ago now. It's just over 2 years to the day of his acquittal now. And then since then, he's obviously, gained notoriety and sort of become like a pseudo celebrity for a little bit there as it was after the fact. And he's done a bunch of stuff at Turning Point USA where he's done various speeches and stuff. Of course, you've had all these leftist douchebags coming out of the woodwork and trying to basically cancel him as what it is there again. I believe he had renounced his like previous support for BLM and stuff like that and was like, yeah, fuck these people now, whatever the case be. And it's like, you should have said that like 4 years ago, dude, basically is what it is. You also have had that piece of shit Gross Kurtz, who has now tried to file a lawsuit against Kyle Rittenhouse for a bunch of money. I'm not sure how that's going, if it's been tossed out of court or what it is right now. I haven't really heard any updates on that one recently because that was a couple years ago now. And then you also had, I believe it was the families of Anthony Huber and Joseph Rosenbaum, respectively, who tried to sue Rittenhouse for a bunch of money for wrongful death, is what it is there. Even though the piece of shit criminal sons, had they just not done criminal shit that night, would still be alive today, is what it is there. And then, of course, you've had a bunch of dumbass leftists who, in that time period, have now basically claimed that both Rosenbaum and Huber were black, even though they were totally, like, white as a fucking snow, is what it is, dude. Like, they were like, basically, like, the super, like, gothy vampire white is what it was there, dude. So, and it's kind of ironic when you look at it because the only people that Rittenhouse actually killed that night were two gingers. Because both Rosenbaum and Huber were redheaded guys is what it was there. So, anyway, I'm not saying that gingers are evil. Obviously, we know one of our boys in Texas there is a good guy. He's a ginger. Unfortunately, he's on the verge of losing everything right now because of, again, going back to the fuckery of everything right now is what it is. So I'm not going to get into that because this is personal stuff. If you want to know about that, I'll let him know about that. But yeah, it's not going good for him and his wife right now, unfortunately. So I've tried to help him as much as I can, but there's only so much I can do financially or physically or whatever the case be. So there you go. But and then of course going back to things that have happened in the last 5 years, I now have this hat for my autism is what it is there. With my please be patient, I have autism and a gun in my pocket, which I really wish, honestly, I don't know if it's something where they can only do like this part of the hat or something like that as like the thing. Because you would think it would say like where it says it like right here, it would have just gone like right there, should have been where the pocket should have been thing as, and then there should have been nothing on that last little bit here is what it is. So, but yeah, I showed this to my uncle yesterday when we came back from a trip to Walmart, and he was like kind of laughing about it. He's like, "That's funny, man." So I kind of wish I really wish, honestly, like the autism part of that would show up better because unless you're like right there on it, like it kind of blends in. Which I think had they used a little bit different styling of letteration, or had it just been like fully like a black letteration instead of being like a bunch of different letters, or maybe even if the hat itself had been like a different color or something like that, it might have worked out better or something like that. But yeah, it's not a bad hat though. For I think this was like $10 or something like that. What it was. Now, granted, the fact that it came from China and it took like 2 weeks to get here through like customs and stuff like that was ridiculous. But yeah, that's besides the point. That's what it is. So anyway, But yeah, needless to say, and as far as I'm aware, going back to what originally started the whole Kenosha riots, what it was there, which is idiot Jacob Blake, I'm pretty sure they let that guy with a slap on the wrist too, as well, like the leftist DAs did, even though he was the reason that the whole thing happened to begin with, and was already a convicted felon at the time of doing all his crimes that was there. So yeah, it's funny to me that, like, with the exception of Rittenhouse and a handful of people that were there that were protecting business and stuff like that that had no criminal records and were obviously armed that night, literally everybody else that was doing the rioting were all convicted felons that was there, dude. So, like, it kind of shows, like, exactly who the left is and who they protect at this point, you know, in 2025 and even going back to 2020, there's what it was. Because who are they protecting? They're protecting the criminal element, you know. And then if we move forward here to 2025, we can talk about Trump and DC right now, where you have within a week or so of National Guard take over that city, which is technically a federal territory, is what we should be talking about with Washington D.C. There's what it is. Which I've literally gotten into heated arguments with people on Facebook in the last 2 days about that one. People are all like, "Oh, it's fucking bullshit. There's National Guard now in Washington D.C. carrying firearms." It's like, wait, you're trying to tell me they weren't armed at this point? Like, pretty sure they were armed this entire time. You're just knowing about it now because the mainstream media finally told your dumbasses about it there, dude. Because I'm pretty sure you're not going to have National Guard in the territory of Washington, D.C. There's what it was, District of Columbia, unarmed, going after violent armed criminals with legally possessed firearms is there, dude. So, you know, like, it's just common sense to think they're going to be armed as what it is there. But yeah, people had a problem with that apparently, and I'm just like, yeah, y'all are fucking dumb, dude, for real. Like, you know nothing about the Constitution, you know nothing about anything in this country. Just shut the fuck up and move on. Because every time you dumbass leftists open your fucking stupid mouths, you just make yourselves like even dumber as what it is there. So, anyway, but yeah, the entire point of the matter is, though, is like going back to Rittenhouse and self-defense shooting is what it is there. Kyle did pretty much everything that he could have done and did it right, obviously. And it's ironic because even like during the trial when he was talking about stuff, it was not until like an hour before they had gone down to that city that him and his buddy Dominic Black had stopped at a random gun shop and picked up the rifle slings that he had on his gun that night is what it was. Because up to that point they had nothing. They were just going to walk in there with like two armed like two long guns without any kind of retention of any kind on there they put on their body. So the fact that he walked into a gun shop like an hour or so before that and bought like a couple of $10 slings that it was, or whatever the cheapest thing was you could find there, is pretty telling, obviously. And even going back to what I was saying earlier about Rittenhouse and Dominic's house is what it is there. So obviously Dominic was the one that bought the AR is what it was there. He was also the one that handed Kyle the AR, according to what Kyle said. He said he never loaded around in the chamber, but yet obviously somebody else had charged that handle. The load went in there is what it was there. So we don't know if that's Dominic. We don't know if it was Dominic's stepfather. We don't know if it was somebody else in the house. We don't know if Kyle was lying. He actually did do that. Who the fuck knows? I'm going to take the kid as a word, though, and say it was basically somebody else, probably. My assumption is, obviously, if you're going to hand somebody a gun, like, you're probably going to, you know, be the one that does, like, a load into the, like, actually doing, like, a rack of the slide or whatever the case be, or in that case, like, you know, charging the handle of the rifle and making sure there's one in the chamber, basically. So, but yeah, it's interesting to note, like, everything there. And then of course people are always saying like how the reason that, if you notice like the way that Kyle's AR jams and stuff like that, and he had to use the forward assist thing is what it was there. A lot of people are saying it was the ammo in question he was using, which my understanding was, I believe it was what is that cheap ass shit from Mexico? It's the people that do like rock, No, it's not Rock Island, was it? So I was gonna say it was their ammunition. I don't think that's what it was. No, that wasn't it. It was like that really like dirty Mexican gunpowder ammunition that's on the market that comes in like 50 round packs. Usually, what it is there. God, I can't remember what the fuck it's called now. And the reason I say that specifically is because when they found the shell casings that were Kyle's shell casings, that's what they actually found. Like when you looked at the shell casing, it actually had like the name of the brand on what it was there. So let me look it up right now. Okay, so it's FMJs. Yeah, I'm not seeing anything about what the particular brand was there, what it was. Obviously, another thing since then is Kyle did allow the pieces of shit in Wisconsin to literally destroy that AR, which I think is bullshit personally because, and I understand you might not want it back because, now it has like two. Sorry, my audio went down there. So going back to what I was saying a minute ago, I don't know how long my audio was down for, but either way. The whole thing with Kyle Rittenhouse was it was like a clear cut case of self defense. It was a clear cut case of stand your ground. Like the fact that he was even being charged at all is absolute bullshit. So, okay, so it was 2 minutes then. Okay, so the point I was trying to make was looking at the Kenosha unrest here, what it is. you have, like, this is basically what they tried to charge Kyle with that night, which was all this crap right here is what it is. And it was just like an overcharge. Number one, it was Rittenhouse not only being overcharged, but it was also just like the malicious persecution by these piece of shit criminal DAs is what it is there. And I think that's the main reason why he ended up being acquitted is what was there, because you had people being like, hey, there's so much evidence, video evidence of this being a self-defense encounter, being this stand your ground kind of encounter. Like, why is this dude being charged at all? And then you realize it's because pieces of shit like Thomas Binger were trying to make a name for themselves. That's what it was Aguila ammo. So, yeah, and then Kyle was using Aguila as it was that night, and that's what people were talking about with him between the time that he ended up shooting Hoover, and then the rifle basically jamming to the point he had to like use the forward assist and stuff like that before he blew Gage's arm off what was there. Because you had people were saying it was like the dirty ammunition or whatever in the gun that was causing that the bolt to not go fully forward as it was there. It could also be the fact that, again, if it was a situation where Kyle had taken that gun to the range with Black and his family and stuff like that, and nobody ever bothered to clean that gun, nobody ever bothered to oil the bolt and stuff in that gun, it's entirely possible that it was just dirty from the Aguila ammo that was used previous to that in that range trip, and that's maybe why it wasn't fully functioning after a couple of rounds, and obviously, you know, being tumbled on the ground and stuff like that's what it was there. So it could have been a million different things, honestly, that caused that like kind of jam up as it was there. So, you know, you never know. But I will say one thing, like, I do believe, and like I know Honda's talked about this many times in the past, and I truly believe that that'd be the case now. Like, I think God was looking out for Kyle Rittenhouse that night, dude. Like, I really do, because for all intents and purposes, like, Kyle should have been killed that night, 100%. Like, there was no way he should have survived that encounter, dude, with that many fucking people and that many armed people trying to kill him that night. Like, there was no way that he shouldn't have like had like several rounds in him then by somebody is what it was there. I'm not saying that he should have had that, obviously. What I'm saying is like the fact that it didn't happen, the fact that all those bullets basically missed his ass somehow, especially with people shooting off the side of what it was there when he was like trying to walk towards the cops. Like, to me, what that shows is like, obviously there was some kind of protection going on there. Maybe or just terrible shots, one of the two, I'm not sure. But either way, it's just like, it seems like there's a higher power at work there that kept Rittenhouse alive is what it is. And I feel like he definitely needs to do something with that. Like, whether that be running for office on a 2A platform and stuff like that, and actually be legitimate about 2A platforms and stuff, or whether it be, you know, something. Like, I feel like this dude's meant to be on this earth for a reason is what it is there. So, but anywho, that's pretty much the gist of what happened there with Rittenhouse 5 years ago now. Oh, so that's another thing. So my understanding was you had, obviously there was people that were trying to burn dumpsters, what was there that got, my understanding was you had the main group that was, I believe, that Ryan guy, and then it was the woman who had like a handgun as her like only source of firearms that it was there. And you had a few other people, obviously, that were like the main, because there were several different spots. And I'm going to see if I can find it here on the thing, because there should have been. Okay, yeah, here's the like intersection over where some of these encounters happened. What it was there. So you have like this area here is what it is in this photo. And if we're like right at this like Sheridan and 62nd Street area, here's what it is. It was someplace in here between like area 1, area 2, there's what it is, that you had the specific car dealership that they were protecting, there's what it is. And that's what it was. Those people were specifically there being told, like, hey, stay on the grounds of this dealership, like, don't go off this place is what it is there. And it was somebody saying something about them burning dumpsters, what it was there. And then Kyle, you can actually, and there's a short, like, I think it's like a 2 or 3 second clip, there's what it is, where you just see Kyle Rittenhouse like running through the back shot of somebody else's like interview or something like that. That's what it is, with like some random person on the street. There's what it was. And he's running with a fire extinguisher in his hand is what it is there. And I believe that's what it was. He was running with a fire extinguisher to put out that fire in the dumpster. And then that's basically when you had Rosenbaum and Zeminski's wife, who were basically like crouched down behind a couple of vehicles by another. It was by that second car dealership that the actual fatal encounter happened at then. That they were basically like waiting for him and like trying to ambush him there is what it is. Because they were the ones I believe that set the fires what it was there. And so that's basically why Kyle got separated and why he was by himself there is what it was. And then you had everybody else basically come back around and do some stuff a little bit is there. So, but yeah, you can see where the, like going on that, where like the first encounter happened there is what it was down here. And then he had to basically, like if you look at where the one point is here, so it would be like Sheridan at 63rd there where that road is there. That's where Kyle was trying to run towards there is what it was. And that's where Zeminski, his wife, were telling people, oh, you know, this guy just killed somebody, like you need to beat this kid to death or whatever the case be. And then that's when you have that group of Antifa and BLM like right around this area is what it was at this street here. And that's when Rittenhouse, like, you know, kind of zipped it back the other way and was running towards this way. And that's when you had him run down here. And that's basically where Hooper's ass got shot was down here is what it was then. That's also where Gage got popped and everybody else got shot at and stuff like that is what it was then. So, but anyway. So yeah, it's a pretty decent distance there. That's at least like a block away anyway. So yeah, that's what it was. It was the car source locations is what they're saying there in this article here. So, and we'll actually discuss this whole confrontation. Here's what it is. Yes, according to testimony, Rittenhouse was on patrol along Sheridan Road, south of 60th Street, with another armed volunteer. This Ryan Bosch was the guy's name. This was the guy who was the military vet dude who was talking about how it was him and Kyle were having a cigarette or whatever, went towards one of these buildings or whatever it was. And that's when Rosenbaum came up there and was like, oh, if I see either one of you guys out here by yourself tonight, you're fucking dead or something like that. That's the way that they were claiming he had said it. Or it was some, I'm not sure if that was like the verbatim quote or whatever it was, or if it was like something similar to that, but it was basically like, that's what he essentially told him was what it was there. But yeah, it was while patrolling Rittenhouse lost contact with the Ryan guy, turned back up Sheridan Road towards car source location 59th and Sheridan, referred to as as car source number 2, where he had been originally posted. However, he was stopped by police stationed at the junction of Sheridan Road and 60th Street, which was, I guess this is 62nd, 63rd. So that'd be up here someplace. So Rittenhouse then went to the nearby Ultimate gas station, believing this to be a safe location. That was, by the way, the same gas station that you had Rosenbaum basically telling people to blast them and stuff like that. That's what it was. Since Rittenhouse testified, he received a call from Dominic Black telling him that the car source location of 63rd and Sheridan was being vandalized, which would be this area here is what it is, and that many vehicles have been set on fire, and requesting him to go to the location, help put out the fires. That's probably why he had why he was running with the fire extinguisher, what it was then. Yeah, okay. Rittenhouse then asked the person at the Ultimate gas station for a fire extinguisher and to accompany him to the car source location on 63rd and Sheridan. This person provided him with a fire extinguisher, but did not accompany him to that location. That's why he was alone, by the way. So Rittenhouse testified that he then walked and ran towards the car source location 63rd and Sheridan, this area here, on his own, carrying a rifle, the fire extinguisher, and some first aid supplies. As he approached the car source lot of 63rd and Sheridan, he heard somebody shout, "Burn in hell." He responded, "Friendly, friendly, friendly," to placate them, but could not see who it was. Rittenhouse then testified that when he reached the car source lot, he noticed a car with flames in the back seat and approached the vehicle intending to put out the fire. He was then approached from near the vehicle by Joshua Zeminski, who was holding a pistol in his hand. Rittenhouse dropped his fire extinguisher intending to run away. He then noticed Rosenbaum approaching him on his right. That's when you obviously had them running towards the thing that it was there. So around the side of the vehicle with a t-shirt wrapped around his head. Says Rittenhouse testified that he recognized Rosenbaum as the man who had previously threatened him, but did not recognize Zeminski. Rittenhouse also testified that he believed Rosenbaum was unarmed, His intention was witnessed. Interaction was witnessed by that's what it was. Richard McGinnis was the guy's name, who perceived that Rosenbaum and other protesters were moving towards Rittenhouse and that Rittenhouse was trying to evade them. So Rittenhouse testified that he believed himself to be in danger and ran southwest across the lot, aiming for the safety of the car source lot buildings. Rosenbaum chased after him. Rittenhouse testified that he heard Zeminski shout to Rosenbaum, "Get him and kill him," and that he soon perceived the avenue of escape to be blocked by vehicles and a group of protesters, aka rioters, aka Antifa BLM terrorists, what I'll call them today, because I hate people fucking write this shit because they're not running it correctly as it is there. And the Rosenbaum was catching up to him. Said video footage showed Rittenhouse being pursued across the parking lot by a group of people. Said during the chase, Rosenbaum threw a plastic bag containing socks, underwear, and deodorant at Rittenhouse. This, by the way, was the stuff that Rosenbaum had gotten when he was, I believe, kicked out of it was either a halfway house or it was a mental institution like previous that day is what it was there. So anyway, this is when Zeminski fired the shot in the air. They say air, but it was not the air. It was literally he was firing it towards Rittenhouse, what it was there, and was later charged. There we go. Later charged with disorderly conduct using a dangerous weapon. Like, how the fuck are you going to charge him with disorderly conduct, dude, when that was obviously like attempted murder is what it was there, buddy. So this is after the shot was fired. Rittenhouse turns around, and this is where you see and sees Rosenbaum like, I love how they say a few feet away. No, he was literally on top of Rittenhouse, dude, literally grabbing for the muzzle of the AR is what it was then. So according to Richard McGinnis, who was standing near Rittenhouse at the time, Rosenbaum shouted, "Fuck you," and lunged at Rittenhouse, grabbing for the barrel of the rifle. Rittenhouse then fired 4 shots at Rosenbaum, killing him. The bullets perforated Rosenbaum's heart, aorta, pulmonary artery, and right lung, fractured his pelvis, and caused minor wounds to his left thigh and forehead, which, again, like, I love how everybody, like, it's funny because when you look at the footage after the fact or whatever, people are like, "Where's the bullet hole? Where's the wounds?" And, like, nobody can figure out where it's at. It's like, yeah, dude, because it was, like, everywhere pretty much is what it was on that dude. Which, good. Fuck that pedophile piece of shit. He should be burning hell right now is what it is. Richard McGinnis, who had been standing 15 feet away and felt one of the bullets whiz by his leg, checked himself before he began to administer first aid to Rosenbaum and Rittenhouse, and told Rittenhouse to call 911. Rittenhouse stood over McGinnis for half a minute before fleeing. That was when he made the call to Dominic Black, by the way, and was heard saying, "I just killed somebody" on his cell phone to his friend Dominic Black as he sprinted out of the parking lot where he had shot Rosenbaum. Rittenhouse then ran down the street towards police vehicles pursued by protesters/rioters. It's interesting, though, because it's not fully the case. And like I said, I had the context earlier on it again. He was trying to run this way towards 63rd and Sheridan, and that's when you had Joshua Zeminski and his wife basically being like, "Hey, he just killed this guy, killed this motherfucker," whatever the case being. That's when you had the black dude being like, "Cream that boy," etc. I think that was Jump King that said that, if I'm not mistaken, but it could have been some other dude that was in that crowd, though. It was also black. Who knows? But it was definitely a black person that was saying it. That was a black male saying it specifically. And yeah, it was that group of like rioters over here is what it was that were doing that shit that Rittenhouse couldn't, evade from is what it is there. And so instead of, just opening fire on that crowd, which may have been legitimately, justified at that point, obviously, if they're trying to kill you, instead he tried to run away this way. And this is where obviously the second fatal encounter happened up here is what it was there. So anyway. And it talks about second confrontation with Gross Kurtz and everybody else, what it was. So, and everything else going on here is what it was then. But yeah, and then of course going back to the malicious persecution and stuff like that, a $2 million bond, by the way, was another thing that Rittenhouse got that was absolutely fucking ridiculous what it is there. So, and then you got the trial and everything else that they charged him with. Yeah, Rittenhouse pled not guilty to our charges January 5th, 2021. And then we had all the stuff there's what it was. And then we finally had the trial and acquittal on in 2023. There's what it was then. And I got other litigation here. See, Dominic Black was charged with. Oh, here we go. So apparently, Dominic Black was charged with 2 felony counts of intentionally giving a dangerous weapon to a minor, resulting in the death, for supplying Rittenhouse with a rifle that killed Rosenbaum and Huber. Bond was set at $2,500. Black pleaded not guilty to the charges in January 2022 as part of a plea deal in which prosecutors agreed to drop the 2 felony counts. Black pled no contest to contributing to delinquency of a minor. That's how he got off as it was. So technically, Dominic Black should be convicted of felony right now for that whole thing. But yeah, that was at the Ultimate gas station. He did that, by the way. So that's it. Was like blast on me for real and stuff like that. And actually, he was all black and ghetto and hood and everything else like that. He's just a fucking idiot and a child molesting piece of shit, basically. And again, may he rot in hell right now. So anyway, then we also had Jocelyn Zeminski, who was charged with disorderly conduct, using a dangerous weapon, obstructing an officer, and arson of property other than a building during Kenosha unrest/rioting. He allegedly fired a shot in the air, which is not in the air. He fired it at Rittenhouse before Kyle killed Rosenbaum in self-defense. Zeminski pled not guilty to all the charges. His trial, scheduled for January 2022, was postponed after he allegedly threatened a witness. In September 2022, while out on bail, Zeminski and his wife Kelly were both charged with several felonies for allegedly attempting to rob a Kenosha man at knife point in August of that year. In 2023, the Zeminskis pled guilty to burglary and robbery with threat of force in exchange for dismissal of other charges related to the burglary. And in Joshua's case, all charges related to the 2020 arrest were also dismissed. In August, Josh was sentenced to 3 years in prison and Kelly to 20 months in prison. What a fucking joke, dude. What an absolute fucking joke. Like, no, these people should be doing life sentences right now, dude. If anything, if we lived in a just society, and I believe Wisconsin is one of these states that doesn't have felony murder rule stuff, is what it is. If we had felony murder rule stuff, dude, these assholes should have all been charged with felony murder rule, and they should have been the ones going to jail forever for Zeminski and Hooper's deaths that is there. And then we got, obviously, civil litigation, which is that, September 2020, plaintiffs, including the partner of Anthony Huber, seeking damages from Rittenhouse, Facebook supposedly far-right group Boogaloo Boys, and the Kenosha Guard militia and its commander, said suit alleges negligence on the part of Facebook for allowing the Kenosha Guard to call for militia members on the platform, and alleges that defendants who participated in a conspiracy to violate civil rights. The suit was withdrawn by the plaintiffs without comment and dismissed with prejudice in the last week of January 2021. And then, obviously, at the same time, you had Hoover's parents engage. Each filed $10 million claims against both the city and county, alleging negligence due to the inactions of protecting their rights. You don't have the right to riot, you fucking cocksuckers. Go fuck yourselves. And then we had August 17, 2021, Hoover's parents filed a lawsuit in federal court against against Kenosha Police Department, Kenosha Sheriff's Department, claiming that law enforcement allowed Rittenhouse to harm people peacefully protesting against the police shooting of Jacob Blake. No, they fucking didn't, you idiots. And your piece of shit fucking son was rioting that night and trying to rob places. Go fuck yourselves, you douchebags. So then you had this idiot, Lynn Alderman, ruled in February 2023 that the suit could proceed. Fucking ridiculous what it is, dude. And then we also had Gage Gross-Kurtz file a lawsuit in Eastern District of Wisconsin, October 14th, 2021, alleging Kenosha law enforcement officials, including Kenosha Police Department and Sheriff's Office, had coordinated and encouraged the participation of armed militias, depriving rioters of their constitutional right to freedom of speech, etc. What a fucking joke, dude. Oh, God, I hate these people so much, dude. Honestly, I feel like the only thing Kyle did wrong that night was he didn't just pop Gage right in the back of the head and Gage just run away. That's what it was, dude. And I mean that seriously. Like, Grosskreutz should not have lived through that whole thing, dude. He should have died with Huber and Rosenbaum that night. So, but yeah, with the exception of that, like, that's pretty much where we're at right now is what it is. And so, yeah, this knife is definitely hard to pop open. So, like I said, I definitely think it needs some oil on it is what it is. Maybe I'll oil it up in the next couple hours here and see if it works better or not. Maybe I'll just leave it for the day is what it is then. So, I'll be back in about 3-ish hours, give or take, for a Tactically Cool Tuesday #2. We'll talk about, obviously, this blade and a few other blades that I've gotten since then. We'll also talk about a few other things relating to various other things. I got a new little flashlight that I thought was going to be a lot bigger than it was. It's not the greatest of all time, but it wasn't also that. I think it was maybe like a $5 to $10 flashlight too, so it's not super expensive. So if you just need like something like a little flashlight or whatever the case be, that might be the one to go with. I will discuss before we leave today, though. I was working with the this work pro that I got the other day. That has a cool little magnetic clip on it. There's what it is. Last night, because I was trimming my toenails, and I will say, specifically, when you have this thing on that sidebar light there, that does light the room up enough to where you can definitely get like some decent throw. That's what it is there. Which I'm not sure how many lumens this thing is, but yeah, for like $16, that is definitely a good nut. That is definitely a good flashlight to have. What it is there, and then of course you got on the opposite side there, you got your little UV light that shows various stuff. If you ever need to do like luminol tests or whatever the case be on something, you could use that for like see if there was like blood splatter or whatever the case be. Or I think it's supposed to naturally pick up like pet urines and stuff like that or whatever the case be. So if you think there's like pee or something from like a dog or a cat around your house that you need to like spray some stuff on, like you can just use that to like check different places and stuff like that. That's what it is. So, but yeah, that's all in my pocket on that one. So anyway, but yeah, Rittenhouse's self-defense is probably one of the greatest examples of just the criminal justice system being complete bullshit in this country, and how you have people that should be in prison for like the rest of their lives, essentially, in the cases of Joshua Zeminski, in the cases of Kelly Zeminski, in the case of Gage Grosskreutz, etc., all basically having their shit dismissed as plea deals to basically testify against innocent kids. What it is there, man. And I will say, I feel very sorry for Rittenhouse because, at 17 years old, this poor dude has basically his entire life ruined. And now at 22 now, he can never get a gainful employment by anybody unless it's like some random person that wants to like give him a job and be like, yeah, I don't care about the backlash or whatever the case be. But like you were talking about, like if you're going to work at like some corporation or whatever the case be, like most likely he's not going to get that job with this dude. So unless he would like start something himself, which I know, again, going back to the gun rights stuff since then, I want to say Kyle has since started working with a Texas gun group that I think was either Texas Gun Rights or it might have been some other gun pro-2A group there in Texas, what it is there, to help like further gun rights in this country, what it is there. And he's starting to do stuff good for the Second Amendment, is what it is there. But then he's also done like other stuff where he's, kind of open his mouth up politically about things, and here and there is what it is. Like I know he shit talked Trump before the election last year, and that's what people were kind of calling him out and being like, "No, fuck you, dude. Like you're 21 years old or whatever it is there." So, who knows? But it's a whole thing, is what it is there. And my whole thing of it is, I really don't care either way, dude. Honestly, like if you want to bash, do whatever. Don't think you're not going to get backlash for it, and especially the fact that when you look at Rittenhouse's entire self-defense, is what it is there, dude. There was nobody on the left or the center that really supported this kid. It was all literally people on the right that were funding his bail, that were trying to give him money to help him out with his bullshit prosecutions and stuff like that, that were basically defending him, that were out there, blanketing the streets and stuff like that and trying to get people to like, back this kid's acquittal and stuff like that. And I understand why people were pissed at him on that one, because it's like, yeah, you're basically like feeling like you're backstabbed by this dude, a couple years after the fact is what it is there. So it is kind of messed up on that aspect of things what it is there. But at the same time, it's like, again, what do you expect? The dude is like, 21, 22 years old what it is there. Like, it's not like he's a boy genius or whatever the case be either, because even if you've ever heard Kyle Rittenhouse after the fact do like interviews and stuff like that, this kid is pretty dumb, honestly. I'm not gonna lie, dude. Like, he is not smart. Like, he's definitely like average Joe and then some. So anyway, but yeah, he's again, and it's a sad situation that's like your claim to fame in this country now is what it is, or in the world basically what it is there, is that you had to basically defend yourself and kill people in self-defense. And that's another thing too, by the way. Like, I don't know in that situation, if I was in Kyle's situation and stuff like that, if I can handle that stuff mentally, dude. Like, I'm gonna have a mental breakdown too, for that matter. Like, and it makes sense why he was like, when you look at like when he was finally acquitted there in 2023, like just the emotional breakdown he had in the courtroom there is like, it's all justified, dude. Like, it makes sense for him to go and have that breakdown like that, because like, you're basically at 20 years old at that point, thinking you're going to be in prison the rest of your life because you literally defended yourself against two fucking scumbags, and then a bunch of other fucking scumbags that were all trying to kill you that night is what it was there. And I'm sure up to that point, that kid has had nightmares and PTSD and stuff like that. Because I believe he even said that on the stand, if I'm not mistaken, about having like PTSD issues and stuff like that. And I could totally understand why. Like, because you're going to relive that moment like forever is what it is there, dude. Like, once you close your eyes at night, like, you're probably reliving that in your nightmares is what it is there, of like, or going through like 50 scenarios in your head of like, what if I did this thing instead? And then it like leads to your death potentially is what it is there. So I don't know. It's just, it's craziness though. But I do feel sorry for the guy, honestly, because it's not something you should have to deal with as a young man in your 20s at this point, obviously. So, and it's even sadder that you basically have civil lawsuits against you and like wrongful death lawsuits against you by these pieces of shit these pieces of shit families, these pieces of shit basically, instead of these scumbag families being like, yeah, sorry, our son was a piece of fucking crap. We apologize for him being a piece of shit and trying to kill you that night. Good riddance to him being gone now, basically, is what it is there, which is exactly what Zeminski's family, or not Zeminski, exactly what Rosenbaum's family should have said entirely. And I would say, truthfully, what Hooper's family should have said too, given the fact that it's interesting to me, because it seems to me like Hooper's family, like his parents and stuff like that, that they probably just wanted a payday is what it was there. And since we know that, like, as far as we're aware, at that point in history, Anthony Hoover was basically living with his girlfriend, who he had kind of beat on a little bit, but he'd also beat on his grandmother too at that point. And you would think, like, being his father or his mother, depending on which one of the family members it is there that the grandma was like, kin to, basically, that you would be like, yeah, fuck this kid. He's beating on, my mom or my mother-in-law, wherever it is at that point then. So it's just bullshit entirely. And again, it goes back to fuck all these people is what it is, dude. Like, this is why, honestly, truthfully, I think in some cases the parents of these fucking people should be charged too at that point, dude. Because now, granted, obviously we can't do that with like, adults is what it is, but you can definitely deal with minors and stuff like that, obviously, to where when you have all these different people out here now committing different crimes and stuff like that, like whether it be DC or Chicago or Ohio, et cetera, here, and it's these kids that are like, 10, 12, 14, 15, 16 years old, whatever it is there, going out there and doing like serious felonies. Like, yes, their parents should be charged as accessories at that point then, dude, because they're obviously not raising these kids at all to have any fucking moral code and any responsibility and stuff like that, or any, accountability for that matter. And then you wonder why your, 14, 15, 16-year-old son has like 18 felonies on his fucking record is what it is there. And the reason I bring it up, obviously, is because I noticed that recently. I was watching something last night, and it was about this kid now, and I think I'm trying to remember if it was Nevada or if it was like one of the surrounding states. There was what it was. Like, it was either Nevada or Illinois or something like that. Maybe it was what it was there. But basically, you had this. It was a 16-year-old black kid who has already had a conviction, has already had like multiple felony convictions on his record, and was now being charged with like 5 different felonies or something like that for whatever crime he committed now is what it is now. And it's just insane, dude, is what it is. And it's like, and people wonder like why we have crime in this country right now out of control. And it's like, yeah, because you fucking piece of shit leftist DAs are going after innocent people like Kyle Rittenhouse instead of going after these fucking shitbag ass criminal minority kids who are doing all this fucking crime. Instead of giving those assholes a slap on the wrist, actually charge them as fucking adults the first time around is what it is, dude. And lock them up for 5, 10, 15 years, whatever it is there, and make sure they do every day that damn sentence. And at the same time, give them a second chance opportunity in the prison system, stop having privatized prison systems, and actually have them do a trade program to where when they come back out 5, 10, 15 years later, they actually have a better way to come back into society and be able to have gainful employment, not just be having a recidivism back into the prison system within the next couple of years at that point then. Because this is the problem with society right now, dude. Instead of doing that stuff, what we're doing instead is we're basically throwing these people away for 5, 10, 15-year bits, whatever it is there, even maybe 2 or 3 years for that matter. And instead of giving them a chance to actually better themselves inside, we're just basically letting people become better criminals, sitting around 23 hours a day and talking to their cellmates or anybody else on the block for that matter, and literally figuring out a way to be a better criminal is what it is there. It's fucking dumb. Like it's a self-replicating problem that could easily be fixed with intervention is what it is there. And that intervention being actual trade programs within the prison system is what it is there. So, and of course, for the ones that are never going to get out, just deal with them accordingly is what it is there, dude. Like, if they're never going to get back out of prison because they're super violent offenders and stuff like that, then I don't know, actually enforce a death penalty better is what it is then. Deal with them as they need to be dealt with is what it is then, dude. Like, if they're too fucking, violent to live or whatever the case be, and they need to die is what it is then for real. So, like, just go, because again, going back full circle, the whole thing, this is what should have happened to Joseph Rosenbaum. That dude should have never been out of prison ever again in his life when he had raped 5 boys from ages 9 to 11. That dude should have been given the death penalty well over a decade before he was by Kyle Rittenhouse. And it's ironic that, again, because people made up memes since then, obviously, it's ironic that going back full circle again on that one, that you have this motherfucker dying doing what he loved, which was chasing minors, is what the meme was. And I kind of like laugh like hesitantly because it's so fucked up, is what it is. Like it's kind of funny, but it's also like super fucked up at the same time because you realize like what this piece of shit did before all that. It's like it's not really funny to laugh about that kind of stuff because the dude did molest a bunch of children and was able to get out of prison even after being a super violent person in prison. Like, that's what's even crazier to me is, like, it would be one thing if he had, like, renounced, like, what he had done or whatever the case be and was like, oh, I'm so sorry for everything I did or whatever the case be. But no, dude, like, this dude was legitimately, like, fighting people in prison. And I'm guessing he was fighting people in prison because they're probably trying to kick his ass is what it was, rightfully so, because the guy's a fucking child molester. Like, the fact that the whole prison didn't just beat his ass to death inside the prison is the problem, honestly, in that case. So... But anyway, it is what it is. So I'm not sure about that one. As far as it didn't say anything on the Wikipedia there, so I'm assuming that some of them are still going. I don't know. So I'm like guessing that's what it is right now, but I have no idea. So anyway, but yeah. On that note, though, it's 2:00 right now. I'm gonna go ahead and call it a day right now. I gotta get something to eat for lunch. Is what it is. I'm probably just eating what I had for dinner last night because I got some of the chicken strips and the potato wedges left. I'll probably heat those up in the microwave or something here in a few minutes then. Just munch on those for the afternoon. That's what it is. So I'm not sure what I'm going to do for dinner. That's what it is. I might just do something else if that be the case then. Maybe do some brats or something if that'd be the case then or something. I got some buns yesterday. So. I totally forgot to buy sausage links at the store yesterday. That kind of pisses me off though. But then again, I've seen there was some weird stuff going. That's another thing I want to talk about real quick before we leave today. There is some weird stuff going on in our food supply right now. There was some person that had bought Hillshire Farm sausage link things or whatever, like kielbasa things that is there. I forget where they got them from. If they was from Costco or just another supermarket or whatever it was. But yeah, they were opening them up or whatever, and there was like this. It was like a weird bacteria or something in the thing that is there. Oh, I need to get this phone call. Okay, I'm glad I picked that phone call up because my meds that were supposed to be here last Friday that came in yesterday and were totally warm and not good. That was the people calling me up and saying they're going to deliver another one here on Thursday for me, and they were trying to figure out if I still had the other one on hand or not. And I was like, yeah, it's still on hand, dude. Like, I'm not going to use it, obviously. And I was like, I don't know what you guys want me to do with it. And they're like, well, we could just send somebody out tomorrow if you want to do that or whatever. And I'm like, could you just do it on Friday? And they're like, yeah. So apparently all I got to do now is I got to take the label off the box that came in, throw the shit back in the box as it is there, and then take a piece of tape or whatever the case be and just put it across that box as it is there. And then it'll just be sent back to the people as what it is there. So, and they'll send me a new one out the day before that, obviously. So that's good. So it makes sense. I'm assuming that I'm assuming that particular one is going to be sent back to them and then probably thrown in like a incinerator or something. Just be my guess right now, because there's no way it's viable right now, is what it is. So that's one reason why I haven't taken it as what it is there, because, you know, as far as I'm aware, the viability is gone at this point. And especially when I looked it up last night, and the fact that it said don't re-refrigerate it is what it is after it's out of, you know, at room temperature for more than X amount of hours, what it is there. So I'm like, yeah, this is what it is right now. So that's what I'll probably do after I finish this stream. This is what it is. I'll take that out of the fridge, because I went through the fridge after the fact last night just because I didn't know about it. So I'll take that out of the fridge, put it back in the box, and just basically leave it sitting out. That's what it is. So, and then pack up that box as it is then to get shipped out in a couple days as what it is then. So, anyways, yeah, I'm glad that was dealt with though. So. Hopefully I'll be able to take my meds on Thursday, or maybe I'll wait until Friday morning to do it then if that be the case. So I don't know. Yeah, I think I'll probably do it on Thursday if that be the case then, just because it's been so long now. So whenever it comes on Thursday or whatever, Thursday afternoon, whatever it is then. But anyways, yeah, I'm glad that was taken care of though. So if only they had done their job correctly the first time around though. So. But yeah, like I said, I'll be back in about 3 hours, give or take, and we'll do the Tactically Cool Tuesday around 5:15, 5:30, something like that tonight. I think maybe I'll reset it for 5:30 actually, because I'm kind of tired right now. I just want to take a nap for a couple hours. So, anyways, but yeah, on that note, it's been fun. It's been real. Hope you guys enjoyed this. My best to Kyle Rittenhouse and all of his future endeavors, because I know, you know, it's got to be tough being labeled a murderer and stuff like that, even though you're obviously not, you know, kill people in self-defense is what it is. There's a difference obviously there. It's justifiable is what it is there. So anyway, but yeah, I would not want to be in that guy's shoes is what it is, just because, you know, whether it be the civil lawsuits, whether it be just people thinking you're a piece of shit, etc., trying to ruin your life for the rest of your life, obviously, at, you know, 20-ish. It just sucks, man. It sucks for him. It sucks. The whole situation sucks in general. And really, like, again, the people to blame at this point really are the cops, the politicians, etc., there in Wisconsin that did not bother shutting that shit down 2 days before that, obviously. Because that's the thing, like even going back to the 2020 rioting and stuff like that, dude, it was all allowed by leftist governors that it is there, whether it be Tony Evers there in Wisconsin, whether it be Tim Walz in Minnesota, et cetera, dude. Because if they really wanted to do their job correctly as a sitting governor, dude, they should have simply made a statement, and it should have been a really short and sweet statement. It should have been, hey, we will not allow rioting in our states, especially in our cities. If you're going to do this stuff, it will be declared an unlawful assembly. You will be arrested for rioting. You will be arrested for terrorism. You will be charged to the fullest extent of the law. Like, it could have been that sweet and simple, honestly. And if they had simply done that and enforced those kind of laws and actually enforced law and order in this country, we wouldn't be in this mess that we're in right now 5 years later is what it is, where you got, again, criminality ramping up like crazy in all these major cities across this country, to where now you have Trump basically talking about activating National Guard on U.S. soil and essentially having a standing army on U.S. soil to do that stuff, when it doesn't need to be that way. So, and the reason I say that obviously is because not only has DC, which technically is the only place you could do that stuff because it's a federal territory, is what it is there. Now he's talking about sending guard to Chicago pretty soon is what it is now. Where in reality, if you just simply cross-deputized the local cops and allowed them to have federal arrest powers, and they could just charge these people federally is what it is that they you know, arrest and catch and stuff like that, it would be a lot better, I believe, personally, because at least then it wouldn't be an actual, like, weird ass, like, pseudo police state kind of martial law situation in the making right now is what it is. Which that's, to me personally, as a constitutionalist, that's what I kind of hear right now happening, is like them just trying to basically be like, oh, it's normal to see like National Guard out in major cities and stuff in this country. And it's like, no, it's not. Or major cities in this country is what it is. And it's like, no, it's not okay to see that stuff, dude. Like, that's the entire point. That's where I will personally push back against is what it is there. It's like, hey, if you want to cross deputize local PDs, etc., to have federal arrest powers, that's one thing. But to sit there and send National Guard out on the streets of America, that is not cool, bro. And it's not necessary, and it's not really warranted, honestly, because you could easily have law and order restored a different way is what it is there. Or even forcing the hand of these prosecutors or letting people off slaps on the wrist and stuff like that, dude. Charge their fucking asses and then replace them immediately with somebody who actually will prosecute these cases to the full extent of the law then, and then keep these fucking violent offenders locked up is what it is then, dude. Like, that would be another way to deal with this stuff without having to go, like, full military police state is what it is there. So there's definitely other avenues that could be explored, but I think that's the problem is nobody really wants to explore that stuff. They really just go full nigh is what it is there. So anyways, but yeah, on that note though, like I said, I'm going to go ahead and probably go take a nap real quick for a little bit and then get something to eat after the fact, and then we'll be back here about 3 hours from now or so. I don't know if that was a trash pickup or what the fuck that was. I noticed it was weird too, because it used to be that, I swear to God, like it was Thursday and Friday is when they used to pick up around here for my trash. Maybe it was Friday, Saturday, something like that. But then it seemed like they were doing it yesterday morning, so I don't know what the hell's going on now. They're just like changing their times or what it is. So the reason I say that obviously is because when you hear, because I heard it the other day, it was like 3:30 or 4:30 in the morning. I'm like, what the hell is that sound? And then I realized, oh yeah, it's one of these idiots out here now from like Kimball or whatever it is there doing the friggin' trash truck right into the dumpster and then like knocking it up and then knocking it back down on the ground is what it is to shake it out basically. So I noticed yesterday I was throwing away trash out there. I don't know if there was somebody that had like thrown something on top of it and it kind of like fell off or what it was, because on the other side of the dumpster there, it looks like there's like a big pile of shit or something there. So I know my cousin, when we went down to the farm a couple weeks ago, he was telling me he heard something in the dumpster and walked over there, and he pulled a board out that was sitting on the side of it because I guess there was a little baby raccoon that had found itself like trapped in the dumpster and he was trying to get back out or whatever. So he's not sure if it ever got back out, but I noticed the other day when I was going outside to pick up a package, I think it was either right off the side of my little porch slab thing there, or it was like right next to it. There was like a big old turd about yay long, give or take. And I looked at it after the fact because I was looking up what kind of animal could have done that. I thought maybe it was a dog in this area, but I think maybe it was one of these raccoons that it was then. So, but yeah, not cool either way. So, but anyways, so hopefully sooner rather than later, though, things will get done and get dealt with what it is there. So, but yeah, it'll be interesting to see what happens though when it comes to the future of Rittenhouse's life and stuff like that's what it is. Because, like I said, it'll be. It's kind of a sad situation all around, is what it is. And actually, even going back to the age of Kyle at the time and the age of the guys that he shot and stuff like that. So Kyle was 17, Rosenbaum was 36, Huber was 26, and Grosskreutz was 26. So that means Kyle is now 22, and Grosskreutz is now 31. So, and then of course the others were the age they were when they died is what was there. So, anyway, I don't know. Kenosha, like that's the thing. The riots of 2020 were just fucked up in general and never needed to happen. But like I said, it's the fact that we're not charging the politicians that were in power that refused to enforce law and order at that time and actually activate their state national guards, etc. Like, that's a huge issue in itself right there. It is what it is, because you're basically telling these leftist pieces of shit, like, no, you're fine. Go out there and riot, dude, and we'll protect you. And the thing was, even Kamala and company were bail funding these people out of prison. What it was, dude. Like, they did get arrested. It's like, oh no, here's your bail. Your bail's being paid now. Oh, leftist DAs that were gonna previously possibly charge people. No, don't charge them at all. Just let them loose, so they can do more rioting and more damage and cause more havoc and mayhem and anarchy and chaos and stuff like that's what it is. It's like, no, fuck that, dude. Charge them the full extent of the law. Hit them all. If anything, going back to what Hoover's family was trying to do, or his chip was trying to do there with the conspiracy crap, like, no, hit all these motherfuckers with just conspiracy charges, what it is there, dude, because that's the actual definition of what they were doing there, because they were all conspiring with each other to do these fucking riots, etc., and charge the politicians that were bail funding their asses too, for that matter. And that's how you restore law and order in this country. You remove the actual criminals in power. You remove the criminal violent arm of them at that point that are in the streets doing this shit, and you actually fix this country once and for all. And it all has to do with arresting leftists out of fucking offices there, and arresting leftists on the streets and stuff like that. They were doing the rioting, the terrorism, and stuff like that. And if we actually had a good country like that did that kind of stuff, we would be fine in like 5 minutes with this there, dude. Which is what we basically have seen now in Washington D.C. there, when you had no murders for an entire week in that fucking capital is what it is there, dude. So, and what's even more crazy is that you then have black people coming out of the woodwork then and being like, no, we want to have these murders happen. Here's what it is. And it's like, what the fuck? Like, what is the matter with you people, man? Seriously, like, you have no common sense, bro, at all. Like, you have no logic behind your fucking reasoning at all there, man. Like, why would you want to see people get murdered? Like, it should be a good thing there's no murders happening in that fucking area, dude. You should want to have peace and prosperity there is what it is. And it kind of makes me wonder if some of these people just thrive on violence as it is there, dude. And I think in a lot of cases they do, honestly, because even going, for a minute here and talking about that Raja Jackson asshole, dude, Rampage's son there. It was that dude, and it was some jerk off named AJ Mana, who basically rizzed him up there or whatever, and like got him all riled up, whatever, to do that shit to almost kill that guy in the ring the other day. And it's just ridiculous. I talked to my sister about that last night even, and she was like, no, like that Raja guy needs to be in prison forever right now. And I'm like, exactly. And you're talking about some woman who is like very hard left is what it is there, dude. But like even she understands that like law and order is needed in that situation there. So, yeah, it's just craziness, dude. So, yeah, I don't know what the hell's wrong with the other people, though, man. Like, they just got, like, a screw loose or something is what it is there. Maybe multiple screws loose for that matter. Who knows? Maybe the bolts aren't all the way tightened up or something like that is what it is or something there, dude. Or it might just be the low IQness, honestly, at that point, honestly, is what it is. So, I think that's kind of what it is in some of these cases. But, before we leave today, I'm going to show off something else I got in one of my packages the other day, which was this other new hat, which is apparently that little sun thing right there is what it is. So, the only thing I don't like about this one is that it's not quite big enough for my head, because my head's pretty big. And this is unfortunately not an adjustable hat, so it kind of is what it is, but it like almost fits perfectly, except there's like right in this area right here, when it comes down onto my head, it kind of hurts a little bit. Like it needs to get like stretched out a little bit or something there. But yeah, I figure I'll have this thing when I'm fishing, is what it is, so I don't get too bad a sunburn on my forehead or on my neck or anything like that. Because I noticed when I came back from fishing a couple weeks ago, there was a like right on the top of my forehead on this side, there was pretty bad sunburn a few days later. So maybe I'll just wear my autism hat out or something like that there. So I think this one would probably get pretty sweaty though, which I think that hat would be a better hat just to have because of that reason, obviously. But yeah, the other hat there I think was like $8 on Amazon there. So it wasn't too bad price wise. And I think that could also be a good hat to have just, going out and about in the summertime is what it is there, so that way I don't get, severe like sunburn on my face or anything. That's what it is there. So keep the UV light and stuff like that off my rosy face is what it is here. So anyway, but almost 2 hours later though, and almost 2:30 now. Like I said, I will give it a call it a day on this one. Hope you guys enjoyed this. As always, stay safe, stay vigilant, always be carrying, always know your exits and how to get out of there. Have an escape route if you need to have one, just like Rittenhouse needed to have one that night from all these leftist crazy ass terrorists. And basically, no situationally awareness of where you're at, what you're doing, and who is around you at all times, because you never know if some nutcase is going to run out of a bunch of cars, steal your gun, and try to kill you with it is what it is there. And you in the junk multiple times. So, but good riddance to Bomb, Anthony Hoover, etc., because these people were garbage human beings, and they were exactly where they need to be right now, which is 6 feet under. So, peace out, y'all. Later.